redefine success? What's it mean to you?
Okay, well, I'm going to go a little bit controversial with this one, because I am going to say money and wealth, for me, is success. And I'll tell you why. For me, success is about having those material things and having a nice home and money, because I never had that growing up. And I learnt through lots of various things that happened to me as a child that the only person who takes care of me is me. I actually thought to myself in that moment, you're not dying here like this.
At 7 years old?
Yeah, my dad died in 2017 of an alcohol-induced stroke, and I didn't find out until the middle of COVID. I guess freedom, curiosity and play, they all kind of come together for me as like being a little bit of a rebel. Like I'm always trying to play around and tinker with things and break the system a little bit. The curiosity is what leads me there. The best way I could describe this, and this may sound inappropriate, but freedom for me is like ripping my clothes off and just running through a field naked going, ah! What are the rules here? What are we told we have to do as women? What are we told we have to do during pregnancy? Well, fuck that shit. We should step into flow every time we go to work. We should go to work, do our thing that fills us up, and we should go home feeling better and in a better place than what we did before we came to work. There's a big piece missing out of this workplace culture work I'm doing. Like, I'm just thinking, right, are the values there? Have we got the employee voice there? What's happening with the customer? Like, how are we going to reshape leadership? Are we coaching? Are we stripping out performance? I'm like, oh no, this whole thing is about sex. 48% of marriages end in divorce. What I know through all the research and studies I've done around sex and the clients that come to me, a handful of them, mainly men, come to me because, can I just add something there, Sam, as well? Because I think actually you just kind of recapping that has really made me go, oh, okay, maybe this is the definition of success for me.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm delighted to welcome the amazing Sophie Bryan. How are you?
I am great, Sam. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here today.
This is awesome, eh? It's so strange. We were just talking offline when we met through a mutual friend of ours, Joe Lawton, on one of his away days, and he said he purposely put us together because there was an energy, and he was bang on, to be fair, because we just clicked straight away, didn't we? That immediate thing. We've been speaking about obviously getting you on for a little while, and here we are. Because it's so, honestly, that first time I met you and you was telling me about your story, I was like, God, That would be good. We could almost, everything we're going to try and cover today, we could probably do an episode on each section. But
Yeah.
We're going to pack it in. We're going to pack it in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was almost like each one of those conversations could have been a podcast in itself anyway.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Even when we met and had a coffee, so I was like, we could have recorded this, couldn't we? And
We should have done. We've got to try and pack all of that in about 6 hours worth, Sam,
yeah.
into this.
It's going to be an epic episode, people. Trust me. Well, look, as always, we're gonna jump straight in. Okay, so listen, I want to find out. Tell me, with all the stuff that you've achieved and everything, how do you define success? What's it mean to you?
Okay, well, I'm going to go a little bit controversial with this one because I am going to say money and wealth for me is success. And I'll tell you why. I came from a very impoverished home, a very poor background. Alcoholism, my dad, my mum, working free cleaning jobs. We lived hand to mouth. Many a birthday or Christmas, I'd get things I needed for school. So it wasn't like the niceties always. There were times when I got school shoes for Christmas. So that's my upbringing, right? So I made a pact with myself when I was younger that I was never going to have this life for me when it was my choice. And I think now I have nice things and I have a nice house and I have a nice car and I've worked incredibly hard for those things. And now I can look back and go, wow, I made that pact with myself when I was 9 years old to not live in poverty and to not be able to not afford to have the heating on and to have to share bath water with the whole family. I haven't had that life now because I worked really hard. So for me, success is about having those material things and having a nice home and money because I never had that growing up.
Wow. I love that, actually. Like, I'll tell you why I love it, because it's probably, the podcast title is Helping the World to See Success Differently, right? So my whole thing, the 100th episode, was all around that is not that. But what one thing has come out of all the research I've done and all the people I've asked is actually is different for everyone, right? And sharing that reason why. I guess my thing with that feeling of success when you've achieved that, you've got that good job and you've achieved what you have, and you know your own business now and all of them things that are coming with that, and you've achieved those things. Was there that moment where you sat there and gone, I've done it, I've achieved this?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, there was when I bought my first Chanel handbag. And so, like, a lot of people think that I'm very materialistic, and I maybe in a way I am. But you never underestimate how much that meant to me, being able to buy that for myself. Coming from a place of not having, no one has Chanel handbags when they're younger, do they? But living in a home where I always felt so different to my friends who had not even had money, but just were able to live a normal, comfortable life. And there was never surplus cash for anything in my home. So the day I was able to take a little bit of money out of my business and treat myself to a Chanel handbag was the day I thought, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, of course.
All right, I thought, fuck, Soph, you've made it now. But having said that, of course, the making money and starting my own business and being able to support myself and being fully independent on that front has come from making an impact, right? Which is where I guess most people say, making a difference in the world. And that is a big thing for me. The two have to align. But I could make the impact and not have the financial success, and that wouldn't feel the same to me. That would feel like I'm going backwards in some respects. So controversial or not, the wealth is quite important to me.
But I'm finding it fascinating because the whole mission of mine is to challenge the dictionary definition is the attainment of fame, wealth, and social status, right? And I am saying that I don't agree with that, only purely on the basis that I know how damage it can be when people fall short of that. Yeah. So I wonder, you have achieved it. So there's that feeling of achievement and success. You have gone along them lines. I wonder, what does that look like for that if you hadn't, or what, you know, it's hard to hypothetically say how you feel. Do you know what I mean? But do you feel that I feel like it comes obviously from a deeper place with you. It's not like I just want to get this because I want all these things. It's proving to yourself, I guess, where what you didn't have, and knowing that, I guess, maybe craving some form of security when you're younger that you didn't have, that you've got for yourself and your daughter now, I guess.
Yeah, I had to learn from a very young age to be independent. And I learned through lots of various things that happened to me as a child that the only person who takes care of me is me. And so to bring that to life and then look back and go, oh, I really have taken care of me. Look at what I've done in order to take care of me. That feels really like, wow, that feels like massively successful for me. And it comes from a place of pain and trauma, right, as a child.
Yeah, sure.
And I could have very easily have followed in my family's footsteps, particularly my dad's footsteps as an alcoholic, and I chose not to. I chose to rewrite the script on that.
Why? What was it? What was it about you? What was it about your mindset that made you break that cycle? Made you go?
Okay, so when I was 7, I had pneumonia. I was in hospital, incredibly poorly, wired up. You know, it's like cannulas in your hands, tubes up your nose, everything. And I was incredibly ill, really, really ill. And it took about 3-4 weeks before I was able to kind of get up and move around and get out of bed. And I went into the playroom at the hospital, and I was there by myself. And I had this massive, massive coughing fit. And with pneumonia, your lungs drown you, right? So your body thinks that it's fighting infection, but actually what it's doing is it's kind of drowning you from the inside. And I was basically like drowning myself with all this fluid. And in that moment, there was no doctors around. I was completely by myself. I had to make a decision. And I remember thinking this at 7 years old. I have to decide whether I'm saving my own life or not. And I really had to, 7 years old, having that thought in my head, how the hell do I start breathing again? Because I can't breathe and there's no one here to support me, help me, save my life. And I actually thought to myself in that moment, you're not dying here like this.
At 7 years old?
Yeah. 7 years old. And I wasn't prepared to die alone. So I made that decision that I was going to fight, and I had to put my fingers down my throat and made myself throw up, and eventually I was able to. And then the doctors come running and I was rushed back, and I was bedridden for weeks again and face masks and stuff on. But I think having had that moment as a 7-year-old, something in me, Sam, said, you're a fighter. And I've never, ever forgotten that moment when I had to save my own life. And I think that's where this came from for me. I was like, I'm never going to accept anything better than what I think I deserve.
Wow. That's so inspiring. I mean, blimey. To have that, I guess, like you said, we're faced with adversity throughout life, right? But to be faced with it at that young age and come through it, what's your relationship like with your parents as you've got older? Like, you all right to talk about that?
Yeah. I'm an open. Yeah. I think I'll just quickly go back to that being a 7-year-old when that happened. I'm immensely spiritual. I felt like that was quite a spiritual moment because it didn't feel like I even had the language to verbalise that as a 7-year-old. It felt like it was something else that was being channeling through me in some way. And I've always held that in real kind of tight regard since that moment. Going back to my parents, my dad was in the Falklands War. He was 18 when he went to war. And he saw the most horrific things. Things I wish that I did not know. Because once you hear those stories, you visualise things in your head that you can't. So my dad came out naturally with PTSD, which of course in the 80s was largely misunderstood, misdiagnosed. And so my dad turned to alcohol to numb his pain. I mean, I should never say thankfully, but I'm always looking for the small graces in what happened to me as a child. Thankfully, my dad was not a violent alcoholic. He was more of a subdued, teary man. And actually, I found myself a lot as a child soothing him. And he would always turn to me and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So, and I think that's the early start of me becoming a coach, actually, and this desire to want to help people out of their pain and their trauma. But eventually, that kind of, the alcoholism got worse, especially as I became a teenager, and he started to use me as a scapegoat. So he would be in trouble with my mum because he's gone out and got drunk again, or he's spent all the family money on alcohol, and his behaviour would then be deflected onto me, and my dad would be like, well, I don't know why you're having a go at me because she's 14 years old and she's going out drinking too. You need to. So it was always like, oh, okay, let's move him out of being the line of fire to being me. And my mum, she was very fiery woman. My relationship with her, I think, is quite complex too. Getting pneumonia when I did, and it happening twice as a child, I find that quite hard to forgive. And it feels like the circumstances, it happened when I was 6 and again when I was 7, both of which I nearly died, feels like an act of neglect to me. So I've had to have lots of therapy over that. And then my dad, when I was 17, tried to break into our family home after my mum had thrown him out. He'd followed me home from college, tried to break into the house, knew I was there, and threatened to kill me. And so from that moment onwards, from 17, I never saw my dad again.
Wow.
But there's been some reconciliation there in some way, Sam, because my dad died in 2017 of an alcohol-induced stroke, and I didn't find out until the middle of COVID. So it was like 4 years later, and he had no funeral. He was buried by a local council worker, or cremation. And I thought, okay, how do I deal with this? Like, I carry his DNA. I'm 50% him, right? There are some graces that come with this, and if we go on to talk about like my TED talk and my values later, actually, freedom, curiosity, and play, which are incredibly intrinsically me, they were his. That's him. That's his influence that I've now kept alive. So I decided that he didn't have a eulogy. There was no one there at his funeral. I don't think it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, you don't deserve to die like that, or to not have anyone represent the fact that you lived. Even if how you lived was not acceptable, or, you know, you hurt people, I don't think you deserve to leave this world in that way and not even be acknowledged for your existence. So I wrote a book about him and celebrated him. I told some of the stories I'm telling you now, but that for me was a massive source of healing for me, writing that book, because it felt like he finally had a eulogy that he didn't get.
It's such a wonderful gift to be able to give someone, because I guess there's that element of, I guess, that word forgiveness, for like, because if you paint a picture, and it's interesting to find out more about the book, but paint a picture of him as you have done, especially, you know, the elements of neglect, the threatening to kill you at 7, like those different traumatic experiences that a child shouldn't have to experience, and yet you're, by the sounds of it, you've forgiven him for those things, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I have.
But how have you got to that? How did you get to that point of that?
I think once I understood his PTSD, once I understood some of the awful things he witnessed when he was 18 years old, I kind of thought, oh my God, you poor man. I couldn't help but step into compassion. And like I said, at that time, I mean, we've just about started to find dialogue for mental health now, right? 40 years ago when I was born, there was none. There was no dialogue, and especially for men, where would a man in the 1980s go to talk about how he's suffering and how he's seeing these awful mental images every time he falls? Like, there was no place for that. There's just about a place for it now, let alone back then. And so I stepped into compassion with that and thought, you know what? He was just doing the best that he could with the resources that he had.
That's so beautiful. And I think whatever that message for me, whatever we do in life, that's such a big thing. We just do. And like you said, to deal with what you've had to, and yet still look at it from a different perspective, right? Come around to that side and look at it from, because you're right, like mental health is one of the reasons I do the podcast. We talk about these things, especially amongst men, and the reason that there's still that suicide is still the biggest killer in men. We'll go down that route, because mental illness is tragic that we can't do it. And so much of it's got to come from a place of being able to talk openly and have different conversations. But a man growing up in the 80s in that sense wouldn't have had that skill, wouldn't have had that toolbox, right?
No.
And I guess moving to where we are now, that we need to. But just, I think, from listening to you talk, but from your mindset point of view, being able to, for you to be able to take yourself out of that position and go is such a wonderful thing to be able to have done. And you seem, as you're talking about it, seem at peace with it, and you know, and almost a sadness for him more than anything.
There is a real sadness there, because he could have been so much more than what he was. And he could have experienced so much more of me and my sister's childhood than what he did. There is a real sadness there, and that he didn't do those things. That was war that did that to him. He didn't ask for that at the age of 18. I mean, I don't think any man would want to see what my dad went through, but at the age of 18, that level of immaturity, and then coming out of the war and starting a family very young with my mum, marrying my mum, and then having me, that's a lot. That's a lot.
You should mention about your sisters. Have you spoke about that with you, like, between you? Have they got a similar take on it as you, or?
Me and my sister, I think we both deal with these things in very, very different ways. As you kind of expect, I don't think any siblings, you don't get two siblings that are the same, do you? And so our life paths and how she's dealt with our childhood and how I've dealt with, and it's very different, but we also kind of had two different childhoods in a certain respect.
Is she older or younger?
She's 2 years younger than me. So she was experiencing different things at a different time to what I was experiencing. And yeah, I mean, we have had moments where we've spoken about it, but I think we're both on very different ways of processing this. Yeah, it's quite difficult to have those conversations sometimes, I think. Yeah.
If you could go back to that time, but did you ever get the opportunity to explain? Like you said, you wrote that book to him, which I guess was your way. But did you ever have the opportunity to tell him about how you thought about that, or about him, or if you could go back and tell, what would you say to him?
If I go back and say, I think if I could have a conversation with him now, I think I'll just tell him how grateful I am. Grateful that he created me, grateful that he brought me into this world, grateful that he was such a free spirit. He was very heavily involved in a big biker group. So imagine the Hells Angels, like the next tier down from that. And he actually had many a friend in the Hells Angels. So my childhood was very much sex, drugs and rock and roll. And me and my sister were often, in a beer garden on a Saturday or a Sunday listening to rock music, and, my dad would be there absolutely off his face. And, they were fun times at the time. They were fun times. And he had a real magical spirit about him. When he was being fun, he was a little bit of a mischievous rascal, which is, I think, where I absolutely get that from. Yeah, he's a free spirit, and my number one value is freedom, and that was all my dad was ever seeking. He was just seeking freedom from the torture that he had in his head, freedom from the life he'd created that didn't fit what he needed, and he was in the merchant navy, so he was at sea, and he belonged at sea. He needed to be by the sea, in the sea. He wanted to be on boats. He wanted to be out fishing. He wanted to be out surfing. I often thought, I don't know why you don't just go get on the Greenpeace boat, and because he was a bit of an eco warrior. My dad was a massive, massive eco warrior. We and my sister were very well educated in the Amazon forest and how McDonald's was destroying it. So no, we couldn't have a Happy Meal, and we're not allowed to go to McDonald's because of look at what McDonald's is doing to the planet. No, from a very, very young age, that was instilled in us. And so I would want to tell him how grateful I am, how much of him I now carry, and I would like to think the way I've set my life up to be free, to be playful like he was, I feel like I'm carrying the torch for both of us now.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Honestly, that's. Look, I always start out, and we've gone straight in without me even asking a question around, your life growing up and how that's shaped, and just it's really given me a picture of not only getting to know you recently, I suppose, over the last few months, but really understanding a little bit more about you and where and again back to that definition of success and why that means so much, and that is, and I'm grateful for you sharing that. I really am.
Can I just add something there, Sam, as well? Because I think actually you just kind of recapping that has really made me go, okay, maybe this is the definition of success for me. The definition of success for me has been able to live my free values. So if I can be in freedom, if I can be in curiosity, and I can be in play, that for me is an unrivaled feeling. That's kind of what I live by. It's in my blood. It's in my bones. It just comes out of me. It's who I am. So if I can have those three things happening for me, then that for me is success.
And that for me is magic. For me personally, listen, because one of my learnings from all the conversations I've had is that I actually getting to the end of our life, wherever we are, have I lived a life in alignment with my values, right? And what's great is because on the face of it, it's brilliant how you've just described it, because on the face of it, it's, that Chanel handbag, and that will define me, and that will make me feel like that. But actually, it's not. What you're doing is you're creating a life for yourself that is alignment with your values, as you just said. And that is that feeling when you sit there and you can sit opposite me and go, actually, Mark, the businesses I run, the jobs I do, the things I talk about align with those three things. How you're bringing your daughter up align with those three things. 100%. Right? That for me is the perfect definition of success. Right?
Yeah.
And it's lovely to. Thank you. This leads us in really nicely, actually, because obviously talking about those three values is what you obviously mentioned on your TED talk, and I'm really, really keen to talk about the Montessori, as we mentioned offline. I want to talk about the Montessori method and education around that. So talk to me a little bit about that light bulb moment that you mentioned in your TED talk, where you with those 3 values and where that comes. Talk to me how you got to that point.
Well, I think this starts off a little bit higher actually about me, is that I guess freedom, curiosity and play, they all kind of come together for me as like being a little bit of a rebel. Like I'm always trying to play around and tinker with things and break the system a little bit. The curiosity is what leads me there, because I'm always questioning things and going, is this really, is this the way this can't be the way it's done. I'm going to find a different way of doing it. And that then gives me freedom, right? Because I feel like we all live in a society where we're chained and told by rules and this is the way it is. And for me, the best way I could describe this, and this may sound inappropriate, but freedom for me is like ripping my clothes off and just running through a field naked going, ah! And that is like, how do I get that feeling? How can I unchain myself from everything I'm told I have to be and the systems we have to operate in? How can I get that feeling whilst also being curious and playful? And so naturally, when I fell pregnant with my daughter, I was like, right, well, I'm hacking this system as well. What are the rules here? What are we told we have to do as women? What are we told we have to do during pregnancy? Well, fuck that shit. I'm going to do it differently. So I was the hypnobirthing woman, like trying to give birth naturally. I was like, I don't want any interventions. Leave me alone. Give me my crystals. Refused to go to hospital. I was in a birthing centre. It all went dramatically wrong and I ended up having the complete opposite of the birth that I wanted. But I was already hacking the system there. I was like, right, well, why is it this way? Why has it got to be done that way? Is it congruent with me? Am I still able to be playful and free if you're chaining me to a bed and saying, right, you've got to give birth here in this white clinical box? No, that's not freedom to me. So actually, when she then arrived, I was like, right, do we have to parent like everyone else is parenting? Is that freedom, curiosity and play? No, right. Okay, let's rewrite the rule book on how we parent then. What's going to feel more congruent with me? I was raised being smacked and sat on the naughty step when I was told off. So I was like, right, well, how do we raise a child that is free, curious and playful? How do I raise her in that environment? And so I started researching various different nurseries in preparing for me to go back to work. And I couldn't find anywhere that was congruent with my values. I was like, this is loud, noisy, plastic, lights going off, like all these loud, noisy toys. Kids just kind of sat in the corner to do their own thing. And I was like, oh, this is not doing it for me. And then I just went to this one nursery, and it was a Montessori nursery. And I walked in and I was like, would anybody like to explain to me why there's 3-year-olds chopping carrots with knives? And why is there a lineup of kids with their toothbrushes out, and one like 4-year-old is like squirting little bits of toothpaste on their toothbrushes, and they're all going off. And I was like, this is what 3-year-olds are capable of? Blew my mind. And the Montessori environment is so natural. It's so respectful of natural resources. So everything is glass, metal, bamboo, cork, wicker, so many plants everywhere. You're really immersed into the natural world. There's shells, there's pebbles, and I thought, oh, there's no plastic battery-operated toys here. This is wonderful. So I thought, yeah, this feels good, but I don't know much about Montessori. What is this? And there starts my love affair with Maria Montessori, and trained to be a teacher. So I have a US-based qualification for ages 3 to 6, and I have a UK-based qualification here for ages 6 to 12. And I didn't do it to become a teacher. I did it because I wanted to raise my daughter fully, wholeheartedly Montessori. And yeah, freedom, curiosity and play were actually values that came to me. I knew I felt them, but I didn't have words for them at the time. But those values came to me once I started doing my studies. And I was like, Maria Montessori wanted freedom for children to explore and learn at their own pace. You don't do for a child what they can do for themselves. You never do for a child what they can do for themselves. So if they're able to reach up to that cupboard and get a pot of rice out, you don't pick them up and help them get to the cupboard. You provide a set of steps so they can just independently go do it. You move all of your coat racks down, so when it's time to put on their coat, it's at their height and they just take their coat off. They haven't got to wait for you to go get it off the top hook. You change your work environment so that you don't have to do anything for the child that they are able and safely to do for themselves.
Wow. I said to you before we come on, I purposely, I knew a bit about Montessori because I'd obviously listened to your TED talk and I've done a little bit of research, but I sort of stopped myself really delving into it because I'm just one of my biggest my values is curiosity. Hence why some people say nosy, I say curious. But I love
nosy's definitely. Yeah, I'll definitely take that.
but like one of the reasons I do this, I'm curious and I want to encourage the kids as much as possible to, like, there was once or twice they've said, this may be a silly question, and I'll stop them. But it's never a silly question. Never a silly question, ask a question. But I find that fascinating that there's, like, that whole process is around that. And what was troubling me, that's the wrong thing. I think what I find worrying is that we've still got an education system out there that is the complete opposite to that. It doesn't necessarily align with those things we are taught. And I'm backtracking a little bit here, but again, with the allowing kids to make those mistakes and fail or trip over, and because there's so much, you must see it as well, like helicopter parenting and people, and there's a lot of talk about that. And I'll be honest, I've probably been, as much as I'm along those lines, I've still been guilty of that. No, you don't want them to hurt themselves. You want to do that. You want to wrap them up in cotton wool and protect them, but actually allowing them to just, they are so much more capable than we give them credit for, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And for you to, I guess, recognise that, because how old's your daughter now?
She's 12 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it must, like, to have gone through that. Tell me about her and that sort of, I guess, her growing up in that environment and being able to be. Is she like that? Is she naturally curious, or what was she?
Yeah, well, my daughter is hyper independent now. Like the other day, I was working late, and I came downstairs, and she had cooked me a vegan risotto. She's like, "Mum, I knew you were working late, so I've made you dinner." Risotto, right? This wasn't I've shoved a pizza in the oven. She'd been like vegan butter in the pan and adding little bits, and then she put in a bit more in, and garlic and parsley. Honestly, it was incredible. Yeah, it's like, so yeah, my 12-year-old cooks me risotto for dinner. If ever anyone wants a benefit of educating your child in Montessori, I think that's potentially one of them.
Sold.
Yeah, sold. Absolutely sold. So growing up for her, we didn't just put her into Montessori school. We changed the home environment, so she wasn't in a proper cot. She was able to get in and out of bed and move around as much as she wanted to. Everything was accessible for her that was safe for her to access. And she learned very, very early on very basic skills such as, tying shoelaces, picking up a pen, being able to write her name, all of that. Happened very quickly because she was allowed to independently experience this stuff, rather than being taught to sit down, hold a pencil. And so she developed incredibly quickly, but she was able to be fully immersed in play all the time. Everything was just a big experiment. She'd try something, it wouldn't work. She'd be like, right, what about if I put that in there instead? I'm like, that looks like it works. Now I've just figured out how to put a key in a lock. Wow. There was no kind of direct instruction from me. It was just creating an environment where she could see two things and go, what happens if I do this to it? So she now has this mind where she's, I guess, similar to me. She's always questioning things and she's pulling things apart, and she wants to understand how things work and what happens if I don't put it back the way it's supposed to be. Will it create something different? Will it work in a different way? Might it be even more beautiful than what it was supposed to be if I do it like that?
I'm really keen to explore, because like listening to that, I'm thinking to myself, why as a society is there more people who are in this camp than there is in that camp? Why? Like, because is there any form of negative? Like, because for me, listening to that,
It's a no-brainer, right?
yeah, like why is that not the norm? And this over here, like, what is the norm? What people would say is the norm. Why is that?
Because I think work and education go hand in hand, and so I'm trying to change the work system, right, as a workplace culture consultant. And even the reason why I did my TED talk was what would happen if we had a Montessori-based workplace. If everybody at work had freedom, curiosity and play, and that was the main three constructs we had at work. And I think until the work environment changes and we actually say, no, we don't want all of these structures and all of these policies that restrict people and tell people they have to be at their desk 9 till 5 and tell people they have to produce sex reports, blah, 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 blah. The work takes as long as the work takes. And I think once we start to shift workplace culture and really truly understand what people want from work, the education system is going to have to follow. But right now, because the work system isn't changing, neither is education, because education still thinks it's meeting these needs.
Is it the workplace that needs to come first then, rather than the education system?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does.
It does make, like, in my head, I'm thinking surely we start with, if we change what there, but if we're changing the next generation, and yet they're going into a workplace. They're going to work.
It doesn't fit for them.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and it didn't fit for me, which is why I got to 33 and I went, fuck this shit. I got the job I always wanted, Sam. Like, I'd been working my whole career since I was 17 to be a HR director, and I got there and I thought, what the fuck is this? I'm not doing this. No, hell no. So then started my own business and became an entrepreneur. And I think what will happen is, if we don't start shifting work on what work is really intended to be, which is a place of flow, we should step into flow every time we go to work. We should go to work, do our thing that fills us up, and we should go home feeling better and in a better place than what we did before we came to work. We should go home to our kids, right? And we should be riding off of the dopamine and the, oh my God, I've had such an amazing day at work today. I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And you go and take your kids out to go play ball on the beach. Go take the dog for a walk. Go help your partner make dinner, like being fully present because you've had such a good day at work. Not, don't talk to me, I've had this awful day, I've got to log on at 6:30, I haven't finished this email, blah, blah, blah. We all do it. We all do it, and we shouldn't.
Okay, I just wanted to say something about one of our sponsors, Search 7. They are a search marketing agency for social good. They elevate brands' online exposure locally, nationally and globally through strategic SEO and paid media consultancy. They specialise in many different sectors, including charities, e-commerce, travel, health and medical education, and professional and creative services. They also give agencies and charities the exposure they deserve via their hosted agency and charity events, helping to build community and connections. Their pledge is the inspiration behind their name. Since they started in 2011, they have pledged to give back 7% of their profits to charity. This has become a minimum of 7% each year, with their current fundraising surpassing £150,000 in support of 63 charities. Their latest campaign, #Share177k, aims to raise £177,000 by the end of 2026 to mark their 15th birthday. It's a pleasure to have them as part of the Series 7 of the podcast. I'm delighted. Thanks so much for your support. There's so many things there for me. Because there was one. I think it was your TED talk, or of what I've read from it. I think it was your TED talk you mentioned about something like the statistics were staggering. Something like 8% of the workforce
people are fully engaged.
Yeah. 8%. That is 92%. And not so what, especially when we spend is it because, again, this is again challenging that thing around, so is it because we've set up a society that says we need to earn money to obtain this and go down that route, so that's what we need to survive, and of course we do need money, but surely, so it's a means to an end. Sometimes people look at it, going to work is a means to an end, as opposed to getting up and doing something. Because I know I mentioned this to you before. I think this is not work, is it? Oh my God, I'll get to sit opposite amazing people like you and be inspired and find out about people's lives and learn, and what an education for me, right? So this is not work. And the kids never hear me go, I'm going to work. What they hear is, who's on your podcast today, Dave? What are you doing? What event have you got today? And that is what I want to try and encapsulate. Of course, the stresses and strains of being an entrepreneur and all of that comes with it. And they see me sometimes, God, bloody hell, I can't even say pulling my hair out because I ain't got any. But it's that feeling of sometimes there is that overwhelming thing. But I think ultimately, I do things. My businesses are set up because I do the things that I love doing, and that fills me up. And if there's one thing I'm trying to get across to them, is that I don't care if you sweep the road. Whatever you do, go out there and do something because you love it and it lights you up. So how do we change a society like that? How do we do that?
Well, workplaces traditionally, unless you've got some kind of holocratic way of working, which holocracy removes hierarchy. So you don't have people in leadership roles, it's self-managed teams. Because we have structures, even political structures, but even in the workplace, we have misunderstood leadership. And leadership is dictatorial. Leadership is power. Even in organisations that think they're doing it well, you've still got a head honcho, you've still got someone who's driving things forward. For me, none of that's going to shift, Sam. This whole thing around education is not going to shift until we have leaders in organisations that, one, lead from behind. They let their people actually say what's going on in the organisation, what's wrong, presenting the problems, solving the problems, right? For me, the only role you should have of a leader, we're talking about CEO level, right? CEO, C-suite, directors, their only role should be to enable people to play to their strengths and remove barriers that prevent them from playing to those strengths. That is their only job.
Because listening to you talk like that, and then listening to you talk how you parent as well, that there's a lot of alignment there. Right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Yep.
Actually, and what happens when we create a society like that, where people are parenting in that way? Is it something along the lines of, again, I'm challenging and reframing what success I believe looks like, but what if we reframe the opposite to that, which is seen as failure? Because that's almost what you're allowing people to. I think Stephen Bartlett's done a really good job with the fact of trying to reframe that a little bit. He's got a head of failure or something like that in his things. So I do think is there something along them lines that we've just, these archaic narratives out there and definitions of what things are. I'm a failure, so I've not done this right. I've tried this and it's not worked, so I'm a failure. So that means I'm down here. I've tried this, I've earned this, I'm now a success. Like, changing these narratives has got to be a bit of a starting point. No?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the workplace culture work I do is I actually build failure into the workplace culture, because I encourage all my organisations that I work with to create learning cultures. So we have learning cultures where everything is based on, what am I learning, what am I experiencing? Learning is alongside curiosity, right? Because learning doesn't take place unless you're curious. So you've got to be asking lots of questions, and I remove performance management structures from organisations, and I just create coaching cultures. There's no need for appraisals. There's no need for any of that fucking bullshit, grading people, telling people whether they're a high potential or you can have a 10% bonus this year because you're the highest leading person, but that person down there is nothing. Bullshit on that. Everyone just gets coached. Everyone just gets coached. And if you're coming from a place of strength, you're coaching those people to step into their best selves. So I think a big part of workplace culture is the failing, enabling people to fail, because isn't that where our best learning comes from? Do we learn? Do we learn from reading a book, or do we learn from giving something a try, fucking up big time, and going, shit? All right, that's not how we do it then, but this is how we do it. And so I work a lot with customer service teams, And they're like, how are you going to improve the workplace culture, Sophie? By looking at all the doom and gloom. I'm like, we want the doom and gloom. Bring it all in. Let's try and figure out what it is that we're doing. Go away and experiment and see what happens if that customer didn't work. Wow, what did it teach you then? How can we now shift knowing what we now know? If you don't fail, you've just got all these unknowns.
This is so fascinating to me. I really think that as a society, this is where we need to start looking. Right? It's really strange because I talk about the education system on here so much, and I sound like a bad man, and I'm not. I'm just saying it needs to change, and I don't know how to. I'll be honest, I haven't got the answers. I don't know what it means. And this is what I'm excited about. Right? I really do, but there's something in this, right, where you go, we create different environment here, and then we go back, and then we start training the next or coaching the next generation of children coming through, and the education system then sets people up for this environment that we've created over here in the workplace.
You know, I said to you about I think it starts in the workplace first. It starts with organisations. Let's face it, that's what's running the world right now. If leaders enable people to play to their strengths, create an environment where people get to play to their strengths, and they're allowed to fail, and then their job is to remove barriers that prevent those people from playing to their strengths. Imagine leaders are doing that. Imagine if teachers then did that too. If the sole job of a teacher was to allow a child to play to their strengths and remove barriers that prevented them from doing that, can you imagine how many kids would come out of school absolutely loving their education, not feeling like, well, I failed because I didn't get a B in maths, or I can't go to university? Because what we do is we try to make everything fit for everyone. But what about if you're not interested in art and you just want to go and sit and play in the science lab? Well, go sit and play in the science lab then. And immerse yourself in maths by being able to figure out quantity and mass and volume, right? All of that comes in. But allow that child to express their strength and their gift through that. And I think if teachers were just trained to enable children to flourish in the things they're really good at, rather than trying to get them to be mediocre at everything, which is what we do in the workplace too.
You know what? It reminds me. I think Jimmy Carr said it on a podcast I listened to, and he said along these lines, right? What we don't need, why are we teaching kids in that way, right? Because if someone's not great at math, why are we not playing to their strengths? Exactly what you're saying. Why are people not playing? Because what we don't need is someone who's shit at maths. Do you know what I mean? If I'm no good at maths, why are you wasting that energy of 5 years of torturing that child who just doesn't get it? Why not just let them go and sit in the art room and do art, go do drama, go play football, go and sit and research history, whatever their thing is, because you can still get a well-rounded education from that particular strength, right? Because like I said, if your passion is science, you're still going to have to learn to do volume, quantity, maths, right? It's all going to still come in, but you're not learning algebra and trigonometry and, compass sets and all of that nonsense that just has absolutely no relevance in modern day life whatsoever. What I'm keen to... Because listening to you talk, it just... For me, I guess it aligns with my mindset, right? So it's, I'm sold, done, okay. But I'm always keen to explore where's the. Do you go into organisations? And what pushback do you get regarding this, or do you?
Yeah, I get a lot of pushback. Well, that was quite funny because before COVID, I was helping organisations create what I call freedom within boundaries, which is exactly the same as Montessori, right? You allow freedom here, but there are certain constructs which mean actually that's too far, that's too much freedom, right? Because too much freedom is chaos, right? So you've got to find that kind of, you end up in anarchy and if there's too much freedom. So I was helping organisations find this balance of how do you trust your people? How do you give them freedom and autonomy to do their best work? And a lot of that was around presenteeism, getting people to come and sit at a desk, and that's how people were mostly being assessed on their performance, not actually their output and how they were showing up, and were they a good team player, and were they curious about their colleagues, and did they help and support and guide. No, it was what time did they log on, how long was they sat at their desk, how long did they take for lunch, and what time did they go home. And in many organisations, the late workers were the ones who were the high performers, despite the fact they were sat on eBay and, you know, putting their latest finds on Vinted and Etsy. So that was kind of bullshit. But I was helping organisations do that just before COVID hit. And quite a few organisations were pushing back at me and saying, we're not ready for that. Like, there's no way we can trust our people. My argument is, if you don't trust your people, why the hell are they there? Yeah. If you've recruited a whole team of people you don't trust, what the hell have you done? That's a big issue, right? Any organisation should be able to operate with freedom and boundaries. If you've recruited people you don't trust, then you've got to manage that situation. You've got to deal with that in some way, because you've made a very, very unstable organisation. So forget about your bottom line. Forget about how many sales you're generating. You've created a workforce you don't trust. That's your biggest issue right now. Not all that nonsense. But correct that bit and everything else will start to flow. So anyway, I had all this pushback, Sam, and people were like, no, we're not ready for this, Soph. This is far too radical. And then, of course, COVID happened and I was inundated. I had my best financial years during COVID because all my clients that said, oh, we're not ready for this, we can't do this, this is too much. What do you mean trust our people? What do you mean give them more autonomy? What planet are you on? And then they were like, Soph, you know that thing you said like a couple of years ago? Oh, I think we need your help now. I think we're ready for it. I was like, unfortunately, that ship's sailed for me. I'm doing bigger, better things. I'm working with the companies that are now ahead of the curve on this, that were already doing this stuff, and they're like, right, Soph, now help us mobilise under this situation. What do we do? But yeah, pushback. The freedom piece is a big thing.
Is it because
it's control?
Because control. Because when and let me try. I guess I'd always try and empathise and see it from that perspective, right? So as a leader, myself, I guess, and as running an organisation, when you get to a stage, I guess, where it's your baby, you've built something from the ground up, it's your baby. You go, like, letting go of something can be scary. Oh, like, no one's going to be able to do it as well as me. All that crap that we tell ourselves, but we do. And you go, I can't let go of this element. I've got to, it's mine. And what if they do fuck it? Like, but you're always just going to stay there then, right? You're always just going to stay in that little thing, and you're never going to go to that next level. But you must have seen, I'm assuming then, a big shift from the work that you was visionary really in trying to bring into the workplace, and then COVID forces us to look at all of that. And have you seen more organisations? Have been a shift since COVID and people wanting to open up to that, or not? Have we gone backwards again?
Oh my gosh, we've dipped our toes in. We haven't gone full-heartedly in. We've done it because we were forced to, and then we've reverted back because it's a comfort zone for us. So there's a lot of organisations that did make progress, but they didn't full-heartedly jump into the full commitment of workplace culture. They would do little bits here and there. I think the biggest thing with my job with workplace culture is I'm looking at the whole entire employee life cycle. What is happening before you recruit people? What's happening once you recruit people? How are you recruiting people? Once they're in, how are you inducting them? Then how are you giving them learning development opportunities? Where's their career progression? How are you rewarding and recognising your people? Then if there's a big change in the organisation, merger, acquisition, downscaling, upscaling, massive products taken off, how do you deal with mass change? And then how do you deal with people when it's time for them to leave the organisation, whether that's redundancy, whether that's dismissal, whether the organisation goes into bankruptcy? How do you do it? So I'm looking at the whole thing. And I'm also looking at how the customer's experiencing this, because the customer's experience is reflective of the employee experience. Because you've probably seen this, Sam, right? You know when you ring up a call centre to query your insurance quote. What do you mean it's gone up by £500? Right, I'm gonna get on the phone, right? And you end up speaking to some miserable person going, well, I'm sorry, but your premium for last year was this, and this is why we've added this. And you just know. These are not engaged, happy people. They're not in the 8% of the employee engagement, right? They're in the 92% of disengaged or even actively disengaged, right? But when you've got someone on the end of the phone who is in an organisation where they feel trusted, their psychological safety, they feel like they belong, and all the way through their employee journey, the whole thing is congruent. The way they've been recruited is congruent to how they're now experiencing the employee relationship 3-4 years down the line. How they're developed is congruent with how they're being paid and how they're being recognised. When all of that is working, you have what I call the employee and the customer infinity flow. So the employees are flowing and the customers are flowing. And you have one little chink in that, it doesn't work. So going back to your question around and what am I seeing in organisations, what I'm seeing in organisations is the employee engagement flow is chinked. So there's some good intentions that started off with, okay, everyone can work from home, or we're doing some hybrid systems here, you've got some freedom here now. Well, where's the freedom in learning and development? Where's the freedom in performance management? Where's the freedom in how I'm being rewarded and recognised? So for me, there has to be complete congruency. To have a really strong workplace culture, everything has to be congruent. And we've done little bits, but there's a lot that is now being exposed, which is why I think we are having a bit of a customer care crisis. Because I just think customer service is shocking across the board in most places right now.
Yeah, I got there was a guy who come on the podcast right early on. He was like episode 16 or something like that. Lawrence Bryan. One thing he talked about this back then about customer service. He said, like, when was the last time you had really good customer service? Can you remember? And I was like, oh, yeah. And he said, and also from a business owner's point of view, when do you ever say thank you for your business? Like, if you've got a client, when was the last time you actually said thank you for your business? He goes, I used to recognise any of our clients. I used to recognise whether that be throughout the thing or but I'd always used to say at the end of the year, thank you for your business this year, and I'd give them a gift or whatever it was. And I'd recognise and he said like that again, back to this where it all works through. So if he's doing that with clients and then but actually coming through to staff and all of them things, that it is almost a cycle thing. There's got to be all them different cogs in the wheel. And again, something for me is back to values, and it's not about values that you go, let's just chuck something really cool on the board, right? You must see that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But actually, and the same with individuals as in life, that actually, this is what I stand for and this is what my values are, but then go out and I'm a really kind person, then you go out and be a bit of a prick to someone. Do you know what I mean? Like there's, you're not living in alignment with your values.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where, for me, I guess the personal life and business, there's a crossover when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would definitely say one of the things that used to really grind my gears when I first started doing this workplace culture stuff, which was 15 odd years ago now, is I'd often walk into organisations that had, integrity, partnership, respect on their reception walls, and their staff would wear lanyards around their neck with integrity, partnership, respect. I'm like, all right, well, I want to see some of this integrity, partnership, and respect then, right? And then you go into the organisation, you start working with them, and then especially from a HR perspective, I'm looking through their HR policies and I'm thinking, this is not acting with integrity. And the way you're treating that person is not respectful. And then I'll leave that there and I'll go off and I'll go and listen to perhaps some customer service calls, or go and join the customer service team to listen to know how sales are going. And I'm like, yeah, that's not partnership though, is it? Because you're working in a silo right now. The team perfectly placed over here that wants to help you, but you are siloing. That's not partnership. And so I'd quite often go into organisations and I would start pressing their buttons on their values. Where did they come from? Whose values are these? And you soon establish that these were values that were established in the boardroom in a 2-hour meeting. And what buzzwords do we like? Oh, partnership. Yeah, sounds like a good one. Right, what else have we got? Respect. Yeah, put that in. And then we go out and we tell people this is how you're supposed to behave. What happens when you tell people how to behave rather than getting the employee voice and saying, okay, you are the people that are experiencing the real hub of this business. I think I actually put a post out on LinkedIn yesterday. I did a video about this, around how leaders only see 4% of the problems in the business, but your people see 100% because they're the ones actually doing it. So why would you put these people in the boardroom who only see 4% of the problem, see 4% of the business, and ask them to make a decision on the values of the organisation? It's a nonsense. So you've got your leaders at the top of the triangle and you've got your people at the bottom of the triangle, like an equilateral triangle. You've got to flip it. You've got to put your people at the top and the leaders go down the bottom. The employees are the voice. The employees are the values. So you ask all the people in the organisation, what do you think our values should be? What is really integral to you doing a really good job here? And then you get their words, their exact words, and you don't mince them, you don't change them. That's their authentic voice. The words they give you are the words that you use. It's a big project. It takes a lot of work to try and consolidate it all and fit them all into boxes, and you figure it out. But then you go into the organisation, you're like, I see them there doing belonging. That is belonging right there. And I see them over there doing courage. That's courage over there. Not this partnership, integrity, respect. That's something from the blooming 1970s. And then working with organisations to go, right, if belonging, courage and failure, learning, right, whatever, is a value of yours, how's that playing out in your recruitment process? Show me how you're doing that. How are you doing belonging in your recruitment process? How are you doing courage in your recruitment process? I want to see it everywhere. And that's what it is. That's what's the epicentre of all of it.
And is that, if I said so, for people listening, if there's like from a small SME with 5 to 10 people to a larger company with 300, whatever that looks like, what's the first thing? Is that the first thing that you go in and look to try and achieve? Is what are these values? What do you actually want to bring into the organisation across everything?
Yeah. And I don't want to hear it from the leaders. I'm actually not interested in what they've got to say at this point. I want to hear the employee voice first, and then I'm going to go and talk to the leaders, and I'm going to hear the leadership voice. And do you know what happens when you do that, Sam? The leaders think their people are here, and they're actually over there. And so my job is then to go, okay, why is there such a big... Your employees think the organisation is this, doing this and heading in this direction. You think you're here and this is what your people think of you. There is a huge gap. What's gone on? And so it's about bringing the people who are doing the actual work into the fore. Whether that's values-based stuff, or whether that's we're having a massive financial downturn, we're in the red and we've got to save 1.2 million this year, otherwise we need to make redundancies. Don't sit in the boardroom and have that conversation between yourself and your board of trustees and your investors and all the other nonsense. Go and ask your people. Go tell them you're at a 1.2 million deficit, and go ask them, what do you think we could do to prevent making people redundant? We want you to keep your jobs, but we need your help. What do you think we can do? And I've done it 3-4 times now, Sam, and when I've done it, we've ended up saving more than 1.2 million. And people have saved their jobs, people are more engaged, and actually more money has come into the business.
It's back to that
control.
Yeah. And they do it, but like that change only, I guess from a place of, like you said, creating those environments where it aligns with the freedom, curiosity, along the lines of the Montessori, like you said. If it's that if we can take that into every workplace, that maybe there is that change. And I'm really keen to explore how that aligns. I sort of alluded to it a little bit there around personal lives as well as thing, and because I do, there's obviously another part I really want to delve into with you around. I guess there's that self-expression, the freedom side of it, and you mentioned about when I rip my clothes off, I'm going to run down. But we are videoing it, maybe another time. But I guess looking at, I'd love to talk a little bit about another venture that you've got as well, and, that because it sort of taps in quite nicely with like I said, the link between living your life in accordance with your values, your work on these different strands. You wear more different hats than me, I think. That's why I was so blown away.
I think I'm nearly rivaling you, Sam.
I think you've taken over. I remember when we were sitting there talking, I was like, blimey, I was going through, because we asked each other questions. What do you do? And I was going, God, you do a lot. And then you and I was like, wow, okay. There's more hats there than me. Yeah. But I'm really keen just with the self-expression side of it. And you mentioned, I know you spoke openly about it on your social media and stuff around body dysmorphia disorder. Explain a little bit, because some people might not know much about it. Explain a little bit about that and your relationship with that.
Okay, so body dysmorphic disorder distorts the way that you see your personal image, your body, facially. Some people can fixate on things like they may have a scar on their face or a spot, a mole, imperfections in the skin, and some people can really fixate on that. Other times it's seeing yourself significantly bigger or even seeing yourself significantly smaller. It's a distortion. It's a bit like, have you ever been in those fun fairs where you walk through the hall of mirrors and all of a sudden you're really tall and slim, and then you're really like low to the ground and like you're just a sliver, and that's kind of how those of us that have body dysmorphia can quite often see ourselves. It is, however, a paradox, because in order for me to have got treatment and diagnosed for body dysmorphia, you have to kind of know that what you see in the mirror isn't true, which is difficult because you believe it to be true, right? So it is and actually I've been to quite a few conferences and spoken with lots of different doctors and psychologists around how the brain works with body dysmorphia. How do we go about getting diagnosed? Because there has to be some kind of admittance to a doctor that says, hey, I think I really see myself as really ugly and gross, but I think maybe that might not be true. And that is that's not how we with body dysmorphia see ourselves. We believe it to be true. So I find it fascinating, the psychology of the paradox of it. My body dysmorphia is body dysmorphia, and I have to work very hard to manage the body side of it, but mine is more facial dysmorphia. And I have always struggled with my attractiveness, like facially. And so the past, 3.5 years, I've been kind of doing lots of work around that, whether that be therapy or otherwise. But I decided, which I guess is going to lead us into the next piece of this, for me, whenever I encounter a problem or I'm fearful of something, I'm like, well, what is the most scariest thing I could do to beat this fear then? So, for example, petrified of flying. Well, what's the most scariest thing I could do? Well, the most scariest thing I could do is go do a fear of flying course and get on a freaking plane. So I did, right? And so for me, body dysmorphia, I was like, okay, if you're really petrified of how ugly you look and how you show up in the world and how disgusted you are by your body, what is the most biggest, boldest, scariest freaking thing you could do? Probably to dance on stage semi-naked and reveal my body to 250 people. All right, so if that's what you need to do, then off you go. 3 years later, here I am, burlesque dancer, running a burlesque dance school.
Wow. What, again, is that from a mindset point of view? How do you, because someone listening who is struggling with that, what advice can you give to them around that? Because that's got to be a mindset thing for you. Like, you're like that within business, and has that helped you to overcome that? But anyone listening that maybe hasn't got that type of mindset like that, what advice could you give them to come out of that comfort zone and push themselves to come through that?
Well, I went big guns, right?
Yeah,
I
I'd say
I
so.
went all in. I'm not necessarily advocating that people should do that. I think it's small micro changes, small little micro things that can make a big difference. So, for example, for me, because I have good days and I have bad days facially. For me, I decided as an act of love for my face that I would just buy myself a really luxurious face cream, right? Something that I didn't think my face deserved. And I was like, well, it does now. This cream just cost you 60 quid, Sophie. So now you must put it on your face. And actually enjoying that, irrespective of what I look like, actually just enjoying the texture of it and the smell of it and the experience of me trying to give myself some love and not needing external validation to give me love, but for me to try and do that. So I think you could do really small micro steps with that. And I'm leading from a very feminine perspective, but I realise also men can suffer with body dysmorphia even worse than women can. And you will see this actually a lot with gym behaviour. Men that are addicted to going to the gym can get muscle dysphoria, where they don't think they're big enough, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they just see themselves as being small. And actually then they start taking all manner of bulking agents and, some very nasty drugs to, and that's a mindset thing. It's so again, small things there, like going for a massage, like massaging your body, can be really just, tiny things. Gratitude journaling about the fact you have, and this may not be the case for people. I'm not saying that everyone that's got body dysmorphia is able-bodied either, but appreciating what your body does for you. And even if you aren't fully able-bodied, maybe you are in a wheelchair, maybe there are some kind of restrictions for you, appreciating the parts of your body that do the things for you. So I actually think in some ways there's a little bit of shame for me around my body dysmorphia, because I think, do you know what? How have I got the right to feel so ugly and disgusted about my body when I'm able-bodied, when I have no kind of big imperfections, I'm not a burns victim, I haven't got major scars on my face. How have I got the right to feel this way about myself? And so I flip that and I'm like, I'm just going to be grateful for that. I'm going to be so appreciative of the fact I have an able body, a healthy body. I've got no major health issues. Every day I wake up and I think, oh, I'm still alive. Wow. I'm still in this body. Whew, okay. All right, let's make it count then.
Do you think, like, especially, because I agree with the gratitude side of it, do you think there's, like, I'm just trying to paint a picture, I guess, and some of the tools and skill set you've got from go back to being 7 years old and nearly dying at that point to taking control of that, and I guess do you have a perspective on life that's slightly different from maybe others who haven't been through trauma like that from a young age, to be able to go, and it's maybe easier then to practice gratitude when you feel like, because so many people, I think when you're in a dark place, whether it's mental illness or physical, whatever it is, where you're not in a great space, to gratitude is a massive thing that will help you get out of that, right? But it's hard to see that sometimes, isn't it, when you're in it?
Really hard to see it. That's why, I don't know, for me, like we were talking on the drive here, wasn't we, to come to the podcast around breathing and exercising, and I was talking about, being asthmatic, and sometimes I struggle to catch my breath if I'm running or swimming. And actually, sometimes I like that. Sometimes I like it when I can't catch my breath. I like it when my heart's racing and I'm like, oh, it doesn't freak me out. It doesn't take me back to the trauma of being 7. What it reminds me of is, oh my God, I'm alive. And so I wake up in the morning most days, I open my eyes, and my first thought is, I've got another day. I've got another day here. I don't know when that's going to end. So I wake up in the morning and I'm like, all right, so make it count. What are you going to do?
And again, that explains a little bit about because you've got like, as Joel mentioned, put us together. You just got this energy and this enthusiasm for life, and that's inspiring, right? So you listen to that, but is it a realization? Because actually, we go. I would say until you get to, I'm in my mid-40s now. Until you get to that part of your life that you start to actually realise that life is finite. Because before, when you're in your 20s, you're younger than that. You go, I'm gonna live forever, aren't we? And that's the mindset of, I guess, that younger generation. But when you recognise, like, there's that brilliant book by, I think it's Oliver Burkeman, 4,000 Weeks. And you know what I mean? Those type of when you realise actually life is finite. I've only got a limited amount of time, and we don't know. It may be tomorrow. So actually, just waking up and breathing, and there's so much to be grateful for. Right? There's so much to be grateful for.
And I think I could take that back to my body dysmorphia as well, and go, if life is so finite, do I really want to spend today feeling miserable and hiding myself about how I look, or do I just want to get on with what needs to be done and go do the thing I'm here for? And so that's, I guess, where the burlesque thing kind of came in for me. Like I said about freedom, there are two places where I feel free, and one of the places is when I'm dancing burlesque, or salsa, when I'm dancing salsa, but it's a bigger freedom for me in burlesque, because it really is and here I am. This is me. It's incredibly liberating and immensely playful. So I get to hit two.
Back to those values.
Yeah, I get to hit 2 out of the 3, and I'm also, as I'm curating my performances and I'm teaching the girls that I teach at my dance school, I'm curious about myself. I'm curious about how my body's moving. I'm curious about the music, the story it's trying to tell. How do I want them to feel as they're growing in their bodies and the things that they're going through? What's the stories I want to play out for them? And how do I interpret the music? What's the music telling me to do? So the curiosity is there, and I get to just be wholeheartedly 100% me. No filters, no nothing. It's just me. And that's liberating.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. And one thing I want to touch on, and leading on from that, a big thing I've started to put together a framework of what success looks like, and one of the key elements, one of the pillars of the success is relationships. Listen to you talk there, because I want to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about sex and that part of your and your role in that, but the most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves, right? And so if you're, again, back to values and how you are as a person. If my values are kindness and love, and I'm like that, and I portray myself in the world as that, and I'm like that with other people, I've got to be like that with myself as well.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that. I must admit, like self-love is something I still struggle with. I'm on a journey with that at the moment, and I'm trying to navigate that. But listening to you talk, like, and I know you obviously help people with sex and soul, and even the podcast you talk about stuff about, and helping other people with relationships and their relationship with, I guess, with sex and intimacy and that side of it. But actually, listening to you talk this, and especially with your body dysmorphia, you've got that relationship with yourself. Like listening to how you describe how you trying to talk to yourself in that sense. It's just inspiring to hear, and I guess I'm keen to explore. I'm keen to explore around relationships and what that, and obviously with the burlesque side of it and how that links with sex and soul. Talk to me, share a little bit about how you've got into that element. I guess the sex and soul side of it.
Well, sex and soul happened completely by accident. Because I was in my workplace culture space. I was doing ordinarily different, And I wanted to write a book around my experience of being in HR, because believe me, Sam, I have seen and been party to some stories. Like, I was like, I could write an encyclopedia on the stuff, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I have seen behind the scenes, in that boardroom. Employment tribunals I've been to have just been absolutely ridiculous. So I was like, I really want to kind of do a bit of an expose. Right? Do you remember there was a book many years ago that was written by a lawyer that kind of did an expose on like the law profession? I was like, when that came out, I always wanted to be the HR version of that. So I started thinking about my HR career and started kind of piecing together all these stories that I'd witnessed and experienced. And I mean, I was coming from a place of the bad stuff for the minute. I was like, well, let's get people enticed in with the juicy stuff before I tell them the good stuff, right? And I started noticing that for a lot of my career, decisions were being made in the organisations I worked for based on sex, based on who fancied who was sleeping with who was having an affair with who. And I was like, there's a big piece missing out of this workplace culture work I'm doing. Like, I'm just thinking, right, are the values there? Have we got the employee voice there? What's happening with the customer? Like, how are we going to reshape leadership? Are we coaching? Are we stripping out performance? I'm like, oh no, this whole thing is about sex. The whole thing is about sex. Because as I started to kind of immerse myself into the research around this, I was like, our sense of flow, our sense of work, our sense of creation, that's our sexual energy. Because sex is procreative. That's when we're in union, when we're in collaboration, we're creating something in unity with someone. That's exactly what we're doing in organisations. I was like, oh shit, sex is everywhere. This is what we're running on. We're running on sexual energy when we're at work. So I thought, okay, is this just a really ridiculous hypothesis, Soph? No one's going to take you seriously on this? Or is there something behind it? So I got accepted. I don't know how I wangled this, but I got accepted to the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University to do an advanced diploma in human sexuality. So I thought, right, I've got all the work. I've got 20 odd years worth of experience in HR, workplace culture, qualifications up to the hilt, letters after my name. I can absolutely rock that bit. But ask me to step into the sex space with any kind of academic rigour, and I was like, well, it's just an idea kind of thing. So I thought, right, if this is going to be something credible, I've got to get some decent kind of educational knowledge behind me. And so I started doing that course, and then I did a diploma in sexology, and then I did a diploma in relationship psychology. And gradually, as I was doing this stuff, people were friends, colleagues, clients. Like, what are you up to, Sophie? You're always learning. You just finished your yoga diploma? Yeah, I'm a yoga teacher now, but I'm learning to be a sexologist. What? And the thing is, when you mention to people that you know a lot about sex, or you're trained to be a sex life coach or whatever, people start telling you their sex stories. And so I was telling people about, I'm writing this book, and I think there's some stuff to do around sexual dynamics. And then people would just sit down with me, they'd go for a coffee, go for a long walk, and they'd say, actually, like, can I just say something? I've got this problem, like, this is coming up for me, or I haven't had sex with my partner for 2 years, or I'm really unhappy about this, I'm not sure how I discuss this, addicted to porn, masturbation. All this stuff was just coming at me, and I started sex coaching people without even realising it. And I got about 12 people in, and someone said to me, why are you not doing this like properly? Because look at what you're doing. And I had a real epiphany moment there when I was like, I actually have been just coaching people. I've been changing people's lives with this stuff, and I hadn't acknowledged it. So I thought, okay, there is the sex link to work, and I'm still working on the book now, Sex at Work, which is all about the sexual dynamics that play out with workplace culture. And actually a big steer on that is how we move away from sexual harassment and misogyny in the workplace, and actually how we use our sexual energy for greater things, right? So that's there. But it felt like there was more to be done with sex, and I just don't believe we talk enough about it. So I thought, right, if we don't talk enough about it, you've got to be the person to do the talking about it then, Soph. So I created Sex and Soul, which is my sex life coaching company, and I would call myself a sex conversationalist, actually. I'm a coach, but a conversationalist because I want to talk more about it. We all need to talk more about it. We need
Why do we not?
Why do we not? Because it's so taboo, right? It's seen as dirty, disgusting, inappropriate. Depending on what religious persuasion you are of or how you was raised, there will be that connotation to it. It's, with a lot of stuff, Sam, anything that's pleasurable for us is like, no, you shouldn't do that. Remove people from pleasure, take people away from their natural origin. Let's get as far away from nature as we possibly can. In fact, let's destroy nature. It's the same thing with sex. Let's get as far away from pleasure as... In fact, don't even talk about sex as being pleasurable. It should only be available to us for procreating small, irritating, screaming, small humans. But we don't talk about sex as a source of pleasure. We don't talk enough about it to our partners, and so I feel like it's part of my job, again, is to talk openly, freely, with playfulness and curiosity around what sex really is, and enable people to express that and step into it and access their source of pleasure and access their source of sexual energy.
What things come up? Like you talked about then, because I find this fascinating, like, with the importance, I guess, of sex within a relationship, marriage. Like you said, that like the amount of people you spoke to in marriages haven't had sex for a number of years. What's the common reason that happens? Why are people? Why do, when you first get together, you ripping each other's clothes off, and then 20 years down the line you haven't slept together for 3 years? What are the common things that come up to stop that?
I think the first thing I'll say is one of my biggest frustrations, and I think I said this to you when we first started talking to each other, is we have a wheel of life, right? And there's eight different segments on the wheel of life, and you've got like your work life, you've got your hobbies, you've got money, you've got health and fitness, you've got relationships, friendships, right? Of all of those 8 areas, we generally tend to talk to our partners about 7 of them. We talk about, the mortgage is coming up for remortgage. What should we do? Should we sell the house? Should we stick with the current mortgage provider? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, do you reckon we should change the car? Where should we go on holiday? Have you paid the credit card bill? What are we doing about the school kit, the kids' uniform? Right, we have all of these day-to-day transactional things that fit in to all these wheels of life, except for the one thing that is sex. And I think it's because as a society, we've treated money, mortgage, kids, school, all of those things, they're seen as the most important things. They're the transactional things that keep us going, keep us ticking. Sex is the thing that does that. Sex and intimacy is the thing that does that. But we don't have those conversations with our partners because it's just nice to have. It's, I'm too tired for that right now. Is an anniversary coming? Oh shit! It's an anniversary coming up. That means I've got to fucking sleep with him, don't I? Like that, right? And so you asked me what comes up. That's exactly what comes up.
Really?
Yeah, I've had 3 people that I've coached that only sleep with their husbands on anniversaries, Christmas, and birthdays.
But when you delve into that and you're helping them, is it that? I'm intrigued to go. What is the reason? Is it that they don't find them attractive anymore? Is there been a loss of sexual energy? I guess intimacy, real intimacy, is it different for men and women? Do we look at it in different ways?
Well, I can share with you my experience of this with the coaching clients that I've worked with. So for women, it tends to be 1, fatigue. They're too busy spinning all the plates everywhere. By the time it comes to going to bed, which again is another fallacy, right? That we think sex has to just happen at night in bed with the lights off, 20 minutes and we're done. I think, well, if you're both working from home and the kids are at school at 9:30 and you're both not on a work call, why are you not? Why not, right? So I think part of that is fatigue. I think part of that is the way that women's bodies change, not just from kind of, having your period, then being perimenopausal and going into menopause, but cyclically throughout the month, it's changing. So you've then got to be in alignment with your partner at that point. Like when I'm feeling really up for it, are they up for it or they're not? Like, so sometimes there's a misalignment there of hormones and cycle. And then I also think women are conditioned to believe that we don't need pleasure and that we're not entitled to it, and why should we? So a lot of women that I speak to just dismiss it. They actually do not think that pleasure is important, that being desired is important, that they should even have access to it. So it's rewiring a lot of obviously there's the hormonal stuff that needs to kind of be thought about and think about where you are in your cycle and how that matches with your partner, but it's actually a mindset thing around going, I'm absolutely entitled to sexual pleasure. So that's women. Men, shame. Biggest thing that I see with men is shame. Ashamed of their sexual fantasies. Ashamed of the fact that they really want to have sex with their wives, but they haven't had sex with their partner for 2-3 years. And they're like, I'm ashamed of the fact that my wife doesn't want me in the way I want her to want me. I don't know how to say to her that I want sex because I don't want her to feel like I'm just sexualising her and using her for her body. Shame, like I mentioned before, over I'm now using porn because I have no other outlet for this. I'm addicted to masturbation. A lot of men, I'm going to go all out. You're right on this?
Please.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of men actually grew up with a lot of shame around their penis, and so still carry that now as a grown man.
Shame in what way?
Put that away, that's disgusting, don't play with yourself. One of my clients has a lot of religious shame around his body. And so, yeah, by and large, the shame thing, which I think I was expecting to see more from women, like being ashamed of their bodies, and actually I don't want him to see my body's changed so much after childbirth. No, I see it more from the men, this shame piece coming through. It's actually, I find it a lot more torturing. Some of the men's stories are a lot more torturing for me to listen to and to help and guide and support than what I see from the women.
And
not torturing for me, torturing for them.
Yeah. No, I can see. Yeah. And I'm just intrigued, I guess, to go. What advice if people listening, and because I can pretty anyone listening of mid-40s, my sort of age group will listen to something like that and go, okay, yeah, I'm resonating with this. That's me. I ain't had sex for 3 years with my partner. What is it? What's the first thing a couple comes to? What's the first bit of advice you give them in relation to how to solve that problem?
Okay, there's many things I say here. First of all, I don't work with the couples together. I work with them separately.
Why is that?
Because he's not going to say what he wants to really say in front of her, and she's not going to say what she really wants to say in front of him. So I work separately with them, and then eventually we get to a point where there's a connection where we're like, okay, we're both on the same page now. Now we can step into a safe space. So if I do work with couples, I work separately with them individually. I think another thing to say here is I'm typically talking about heterosexual couples here, but of course that isn't the only space in which we can operate in. And actually I have got several gay couples. And also we're talking about very traditional sex, right? Intercourse.
Yeah.
But sex can be anything we want sex to be. Anything that provides us with pleasure. So it actually could be intimacy more than sex. It could be, actually, I don't need to have sex and I don't want to have sex with you, but...
Like physical, sexual intercourse.
But I really take a lot of pleasure from you stroking my hair and kissing me, and that's all I need, right? So when we talk about sex can be whatever we want it to be, rather than it just being heterosexual intercourse. So I just want to make sure that no one listening to this feels that they're not included in this conversation. But if we take it back to that typical narrative, heterosexual couple haven't had sex for a couple of years. The first thing that I get them to do is to talk about their desire map. I actually get them to go, and this takes about 2 or 3 sessions to dig deep into what do they actually really desire and want from sex. What is it there? What need needs to be filled for them? What is it they're looking for sex for? Because I think quite often we just go, sex, all right, intercourse, boom, that's the thing we need to solve and go do it. By and large, that is not it.
Is that because, mate, I'm just thinking out loud here, but because of porn and stuff like that, people will watch porn and see that is what sex should be, and that's in their mindset, that's what they think it is. So it becomes that, as opposed to a lot of the other things that you're talking about.
Controversial or not, I actually feel quite in defence of porn. I think porn can play a really useful part in all of this. Used wrongly, and the violent porn, women being used inappropriate, all that. No, I'm not talking about that. But I have got a particular steer on porn, which might emerge in a minute. No, I think porn does have a part to play, but I think there's a bigger bit that's come way before porn, and that is how we're spoken to at school about sex. We are taught the mechanics, the biological mechanics of sex is intercourse. Right? We're not right. Yeah, we're not taught about intimacy. We're not taught about pleasure. We're not taught about masturbation. We're not taught about consent. None of that is around what this can do for us, how it can be a bonding unity between you and a partner. How do you know what's going to feel good? How do you know how to say no? How do you know how to build those boundaries around it? How do you keep yourself from STIs? Well, it's just the boys are taught how to use condoms. What about the girls then? Where's their dialogue around this? What discussions do we need to be having with our partners about STIs? And all of that is so substandard, if in existence at all. That's education. And the difficulty we have is that parents rely on the education system to do that. So parents aren't having conversations with their kids around this. And so actually, Sam, a month ago or so, for research for the book, Sex at Work, I set up a Google Doc, and I've been doing this survey, which is still open now in case people are interested in doing it. And it's a series of questions that asks you what your parents told you about sex. And so far, the stories are absolutely shocking. Really? Shocking stories.
In what way?
People are saying like, "Oh, my dad never taught me anything about sex. He just put a condom in my back pocket one night when I went out, and that was it. So I never even didn't know how to put it on, didn't know how to use it, but he just popped it in my pocket and said, 'Keep yourself safe, lad. Off you go.'" One of my friends said that when she first got her first boyfriend, her mum, no kind of context or this is how you keep yourself safe. Her mum just said, "Don't you dare come home pregnant. If you come home pregnant, don't come home." And there's a lot of these stories.
Yeah,
and that's not to say that other parents haven't been more liberal and open, but some of these stories are really quite shocking.
Because I think, like, I'm thinking back now with my kid. Like, I'll be honest, I'd feel uncomfortable talking to my kids about it. And I don't know whether that's shame, embarrassment on my part, and I'm like, I can't. And you're right, like, it's not because the one thing you want to tell your kids, don't have sex because you don't get pregnant or whatever that. If you've got daughters, or don't get someone pregnant if you got, whatever that looks like. So that's the number. But all you're doing is almost repeating what.
But you're not teaching. You're just saying don't do it.
Yeah.
You're not teaching them anything, and actually.
Because is there a fear from parents that, if I talk to them about how pleasurable it is and how great it is, they're going to go, I want to have a go at that then, aren't you? Going to go, but they're going to go and do it anyway.
They're going to go do it anyway. But why are we so frightened? I mean, obviously, underage. We're not talking about the underage stuff, right? But if we're talking to 16, 17-year-olds, why would we be frightened of them having a sexual exploration? Because they're going to do it anyway. And if you haven't given the narrative around that, and you haven't spoken about masturbation, actually, do you even know what you like before you start having sex with someone else? Do you even know your own body? So before you allow someone else to intervene with this, you need to go away and explore yourself. Can you imagine any parents sitting down with their 17-year-old and saying, masturbation's really important. In fact, you know what? I'm going to take you to Ann Summers and I'm going to buy you your first vibrator. But can you imagine what that will do for that young girl as she grows up? How in her body, how aware of what she likes and what she doesn't like, what she will consent to and what she won't consent to. Imagine how empowered she's going to be because she's learned to explore her own body first. And the same thing with boys, being encouraged to play with themselves rather than looking to porn and learning that is what sex is. Learn what you like. So to go back, I know I've gone off on a tangent now, but to go back to the two couples, that's what this desire map thing is about. What do you actually like? What do you actually want?
Because how many people don't know? I bet how many
they
people don't.
They don't know. And I've even had a relationship with someone who I was having a discussion with him around, like, what do you like sexually? And he was like, I don't know. Like, how do you not know? I don't know. I just like sex. What sex? What kind of sex do you like? Sex. And I think lots of people think that. It's just missionary style. Dare I say the word vanilla? missionary style intercourse, and they've not tapped into the remit of the fullness of what sex and intimacy can be. Because, like I say, it may not be sex; it could be intimacy.
Is that if I had to ask you for one key thing, would it be communication?
Absolutely, 100%. Because we don't have a narrative and words for sex, right?
I think that's for me the spot on thing. Like I'm sitting there thinking about myself. I'm thinking about people listening again of my age group, friends I've spoke to and whatever. And we're listening. Just I haven't got the language. Don't know.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even know where to start. Going, let's sit down and have a conversation about sex. This is what I like. Tell me what I want to know what you like. What am I doing that doesn't agree with you? We don't. And again, I'm looking back how we change that narrative. Is it that, again, the education to our kids so that when they go into their relationship, I think when we first got together, I've been with my wife 28 years, we were 18 when we got, you know what I mean? So, like, sexually immature, imagine having had the tools to be able to talk about it back then. Would you create a sexual relationship that lasts longer because you've already explored it at an early stage? You know all of those things, would that?
Yeah. So one of the biggest job I have with Sex and Soul is I help people have braver conversations about sex. That is my primary role. So I'm not necessarily, when I'm working with a woman on her own or I'm working with a guy on his own, I'm not necessarily helping them go out there and have this amazing off-the-chart sex life and they're off having threesomes and BDSM. I mean, yeah, sometimes that does happen, right? But actually the core of it is I'm helping them to tap into what their real core intrinsic sexual needs and desires are. Helping them work through any shame around that, because some people think they've got the most weirdest quirks and fetishes, and they haven't. It's like actually 30% of the British and the US actually have the same thing. You're just part of a third. They're actually a little bit disappointed when they find that out. They're like, I thought my foot fetish was a real thing there. I was like, no, 33% are into it, babe. Sorry. So I help them uncover that. And then I help them find a path to having a safe conversation about that with their partner. Because it's not just you come to me, I give you some questions to go away and after your partner and, you sit down over a glass of wine, you go, right, so, just finished watching EastEnders. So, what do you reckon about our sex? It's like, no, there's got to be quite a build-up of trust that comes into that before you're able to have that conversation about sex. And I'm helping give people the narrative to be able to go away and have those conversations. That, for me, is like the most important part of what I do.
And I wonder how many, actually, like, when I'd be really interested, and on your research you may even know, but like the statistics around how many marriages break down maybe because of, actually, one, I think the key for any relationship, friend, family, wife, husband, whatever that looks like to you, is communication. Right? Got to have levels of communication about everything, whether it be finances, sex, whatever we're talking about. Right? But let's bring it back to this. How many relationships will break down? Someone's cheated which could be avoided if they've got a better narrative and we're openly talking about it more without a shame about it.
I think the current statistics as of last year, or 2023 actually, not 2024, was 48% of marriages end in divorce. 48%. So it's nearly half marriages end in divorce. And then when you start drilling down on that, communication's the absolute crux of it, right? Now, I'm going to give my own view on this. This is not the statistical view, but what I know through all the research and studies I've done around sex and the clients that come to me, a handful of them, mainly men, come to me because they are fearful that they are going to have an affair. Because they're not having sex with their partners. And they're like, I love my partner. I love my kids. I do not want to disrupt the family home. But I've got needs. They're not being met. I've started noticing women more. I've started desiring women more. I've started having a lot more sexual fantasies. And I know that if a woman gave me any attention, that's it. I'd be in there. That's their words, not me. Right?
Wow.
And so what I'm able to do is I'm able to help them again find what they need, find a narrative for it, create the safe space, have the conversation with their partner. And that's now 5 lots of affairs that have now been avoided just because they've worked with me. So imagine what else is happening in dysfunctional marriages where there is no communication, there isn't any sex. And I'm talking about, when I say sex, I'm talking about, I don't want to say good quality, I'm talking about soul nourishing, intimate connection sex, not the we're just doing it for the sake of it, because that doesn't create anything for either of you. You're both just having your needs met independently.
You might as well just go and masturbate, right?
Right, yeah, you might as well just stick some porn on, 5 minutes later, job done. I'm talking about real. I just think, and again, this is a whole hypothesis of mine, but I just think I have yet to see an example of a couple that is having really amazing sex, really well connected with intimacy and communication, and there's an affair happening. I just don't think it happens.
It's like I say, it's fascinating. It's just like you said, and I think I'm just going on my own basis, like listening to this conversation about the narrative I was told about my own feelings around sex. Like I said, even the way I guess I'm repeating a lot of what my parents did with my kids, and I'm like, oh, that needs to change. I don't want them to get to my age and maybe not have just like you said, the language, the openness to be able to just talk about it in a way that's not uncomfortable. And I don't like even having this conversation with you now, like I'm thinking, and I'm someone that talks about every taboo subject, from anything, like I said, I've gone some deep stuff with mental health and them type of things, stuff that suicide prevention, all them things where you talk about, I've got maybe stigmas attached to it. And yet this I personally feel a bit uncomfortable talking about, but I'm so pleased that I am, if you know what I mean, and thinking actually just challenging my own narrative around it, and where does that come from then? And I'm trying to look back to curiosity, I guess, not only one of the reasons I have these conversations, like therapy for me, right? I get to chat to people about things that I think, I'm questioning things about that. So I do find it really fascinating. And the biggest thing I've taken away is, which comes down to so much in life, is around, especially when it comes to relationships, and I'm not just talking about husband and wife and heterosexual friends, whatever it is in life. 2 things for me. One, communication is absolute key. That's what I've taken away. But again, back to the relationships and the narratives and the stories we tell ourselves. It's got to start there.
Yeah.
And before it can, because if I'm sitting there and my wife's really open to talk about stuff, and I'm still, the conversation I'm having with myself are not good enough, and how are we going to communicate together, right?
I think there's so much to be said there as well. This goes back to how I show up in the world. This goes back to my burlesque. This goes back to the fact I've got 3 businesses, that I am, more often than not, I'm in my sexual energy. I've built a relationship with my own sexuality and my own needs and what I want and what I desire. Not from a I need to have sex and self-pleasure, but from me just owning my sexuality and being in this body and experiencing the world and from a place of creative flow and making sure that my values are being met all the way through this. I show up in the world differently now, immensely differently when I'm in my sexual energy. And so even just coaching people to have that communication with themselves, that's the first port of call, let alone having communication with your partner and your friends, etc. Actually admitting some of this to yourself and going, do you know what? I actually am a sexual being. I am allowed to have these desires. I'm allowed to have these fantasies. I'm allowed to feel this way about my body. I'm allowed to have these feelings about who I am. Self-love, and I think especially for men, is incredibly hard because boys aren't brought up around the word love and what does love really mean? Us women, by and large, and I'm just using my own interpretation here, as we're surrounded by the fluffy girls grow up to be mums, and we love babies and we love animals, so we're always around the love, right? Men, no, it's kind of like it's a switch off. You kind of taught to switch it off, right? And so I also have to do a lot of work with men around that, not just sexually, but around finding the core of their self-love. And again, when you switch that on, everything changes. What you attract in the world, who's attracted to you, again, not sexually, but who wants to work with you, who wants to engage with you, who's going to stop and listen to your YouTube video, who's going to listen to your podcast. All of that shifts when you come from that place.
God, there's so many things. Listen, what honestly, it's really strange, isn't it? Because I've been messaging you going, I'm so excited about you coming, and honestly, it's been. Again, I love when things, something's going to be great, and then it exceeds your expectations. It's been such a fascinating. Honestly, we could sit here and talk for another 3-4 hours.
Part
maybe
two,
part two
Sam,
is coming soon. Part two is but honestly, there's so many things for me to. One of my favourite things about doing the podcast is actually going back and when I listen to it again as well, and I'll start putting the trailer together, and I think there's so much gold here. The trailer's probably going to be about 20 minutes long in itself, but I'm so grateful for your wisdom and knowledge and sharing everything you have done as well, especially from trauma and stuff from growing up to your body dysmorphia and everything in between, and talking so openly and about everything. Honestly, it's been such a wonderful conversation with so much. My mind is like I've so much to take away. So I'm really, really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. It's been a real kind of sobering reminder to me of who I am, actually. It kind of feels like the whole entire being of me, what I am, what I stand for, what I believe in, has kind of come out on this podcast. So it feels like this podcast in itself is a bit of a legacy for me. So thank you for giving me the space for that.
Joel, I messaged Joel last night, actually, and I did just say, I've got Sophie on tomorrow. Is there anything you can, any stuff you want to...
shit, what did he say?
And I'll tell you what, and he was bang on. He said, you'll have a wonderful conversation. She's an absolutely wonderful human being, and you'll have a great conversation. You don't need me to say anything else. And that was it. And he was absolutely spot on. You are a wonderful, wonderful human being, and thank you for your openness. And we're gonna finish with something. This is a new podcast tradition that I've started up. Something.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
We do our top table events at our thing, and I use what I call my storytelling cards. So this is where we go round and people get a question, and then they share a story. So on the podcast now, you get the opportunity to pick a card. I don't know what the question's going to be. You just pick any card. Pass it to me and I'll read out the question for you, and then we'll see what it is. Okay, so your question is, when was the last time you had to forgive yourself, and how did it change your outlook?
Oh, I think I'm currently forgiving myself, actually. I've been through some big life changes this past, 15 months. Ended my marriage, divorcing my husband, was a full-time solo parent to a 12-year-old with ADHD, so neurodiverse and queer, having just started a selective grammar school, and started a burlesque dance school and my sex and soul business whilst also alongside workplace culture. Found myself single for the first time in 23 years. And I really beat myself up over not being as successful, not being as fast-paced as I normally am, not being as out there, allowing all my businesses to kind of decline a little. And I went into a space of, you're a failure now, Soph, because you had all these great businesses. In fact, at one point I even stopped calling myself an entrepreneur because I didn't feel like I deserved the title of it. And then I actually had this realisation a few weeks ago, and I thought, wow, hang on, there's a massive reframe here, and I can forgive myself for not showing up in all the ways I think I should have shown up. And the forgiveness came when I thought, wow, you built those businesses and you've done everything that you've done. They have been such a success. You are such a successful entrepreneur because you've been able to take your foot off the pedal to concentrate on navigating all of these big life circumstances that I'm now in, and setting up 2 new businesses and another podcast. And my business has sustained me. Like, that income has still come in. I've been able to buy my husband out of the house. I've not lost everything. My businesses have still carried me, and I haven't done a lot over the past year and a half to grow them. And so I went from failure, doom and gloom, I don't even deserve a title of being an entrepreneur right now, to, wow, okay, you've been through a lot and you're still showing up. Fucking hell, Soph, massive pat on the back.
What a brilliant answer. What a brilliant way to finish.
Thank you.
You're an absolute superstar. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. I can't wait to share this episode.
Thank you,
that,
Sam.
as they say, is a wrap.